everyone. Today our interview is with Commander Rebecca Waddington. She is a NOAA Corps officer and pilot. I think you're really going to enjoy today's interview, so let's get started.
Rebecca, thank you so much for joining me today. Can you first tell us what is NOAA Corps?
Sure, and Kimberly, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be able to spread the word about NOAA and the NOAA Corps. So in answer to your question, the NOAA Corps is one of the uniformed branches of the U.S. So there are 8 uniformed services, and the NOAA Corps is the smallest of all of those. We have 321 commissioned officers, and we don't have any enlisted personnel. So we're very small, which is why a lot of people haven't heard of us yet. But what we do is we focus on science and service for the nation. So our main job is to operate the ships and the aircraft that are used to facilitate NOAA's missions.
Right, and I am wearing my NOAA shirt today to represent. So you talk about ships and you talk about aircraft. So NOAA, a lot of people, especially local, only know about the air side of things, the flight side of things, because you're in Lakeland. But I heard you mention ships as well. So you're sea and air, both. Were you ever on a ship?
I was, and actually the NOAA Corps is comprised of approximately 80% ships and only 20% aviation. So we're primarily a maritime service. The ships do a wide variety of missions. The ship I was on was called the Kaini Moana, which is Hawaiian for the ocean seeker. It was one of our oceanographic research vessels. And we were in charge of servicing the buoy array that's out in the equatorial Pacific region that collects a lot of data, both oceanographic and meteorological data, so that we can help understand El Nino. And of course, for those here in Lakeland, they might know that El Nino really affects if we're going to have a strong or weak hurricane season. So everything ends up tying together. The other kind of ships that we have are hydrographic survey ships. So those ones are ships that stay relatively close to the shoreline of the U.S. They deploy some small boats to go and survey the near shore parts of the ocean. This really helps us update the nautical charts for boating season. We also have a lot of fishery ships, and the mission on those ships is to just maintain a watch over different species. That way we can help control populations to ensure that none of these species go extinct. Very
cool. So, knowing you personally, I know the answers to these questions, but I want to ask them anyways. There are NOAA Corps officers, and you mentioned that it is, part of the Department of Commerce, correct? So not Department of Defense, Department of Commerce. So do y'all have to go through officer training, just like someone who was going to be an officer in the military would?
We do. It's slightly different than some of the other services. We actually partner with the U.S. Coast Guard, and we send all of our new officers to the Coast Guard Academy for their initial training. It's 5 months up in Connecticut, where they're really doing some rigorous training on learning how to first be an officer, and second, how to operate a ship, because again, we're 80% maritime. For those officers like myself who ended up transitioning to the aviation program, that's a separate set of training after our initial, what we call basic officer training for school bonds.
Right. Were you a pilot when you were selected to go the aviation route for NOAA?
I was not. I actually never envisioned myself flying an airplane. I'd always been around planes. If you see the pictures behind me, these are all pictures of fighter jets, which NOAA does not have, but I think they're really cool. And my dad happens to work with the Air Force, so he sent me all those pictures. So I was fascinated by them, but personally never thought I would fly. Not for any reason like I didn't think I could. I was just more interested in researching the weather than I was about flying in the weather. So I entered NOAA to drive a ship. I was interested in weather and in the oceans, and I thought this is a great way to combine my two passions. As a NOAA Corps officer, we alternate between operational assignments and what we call fixed shore assignments. So I spent 2 years at sea, and then I was given my first shore assignment, which lucky enough for me was up in National Hurricane. While I was there, I really got to know more about our aviation program because of the hurricane hunters. And I started thinking more and more about it. And again, my passion wasn't for flying, it was for weather research. But I thought, what better way to understand weather than to be flying into a hurricane? So I applied, and I was fortunate enough to be selected, even though I had 0 flight hours. NOAA actually sent me to flight school. So for 10 months, my job was to learn how to fly. I went from 0 hours to having a commercial multi-engine rating with instrument privileges. And then I moved over to NOAA, again, like inside a NOAA office, where they assigned me to the King Air, which is one of our 9 aircraft. For that, I then went to 3-week specific King Air training before I was allowed to fly NOAA's King Air. And then, of course, we're always learning. It's always on-the-job learning from that point on.
Yeah, okay. I did not know that you came in and were assigned the King Air. So for those of you who are watching, NOAA has different aircraft. It's not just the P-3 Orion that flies through the hurricane. Can you tell us a little bit about the different aircraft and which ones you have been assigned to so far?
Sure. As you mentioned, I think our most famous aircraft are the P-3s, the Hurricane Hunter aircraft. Those are the ones that fly right into the storm. We have 2 of those, affectionately known as Miss Piggy and Kermit. We also have a G4, which is also known as a Hurricane Hunter, and that's the plane I currently fly. It is nicknamed Gonzo, and if you ever see a picture of it, you'll notice that it has a really weird-looking, elongated nose, hence the name. The reason for that is we have a much more powerful radar in the nose because of where we fly. So we had to get an elongated nose cone to fit that radar. The other planes we have are the King Air, which I mentioned. Its primary mission is coastal mapping or emergency response. So it can have a wide variety of sensors that we put into these belly ports that actually look straight down from the fuselage. So it's normally outfitted with some really high resolution cameras that take georeference pictures. So we can see exactly where the tide level is, both at high tide and low tide, again for nautical charts and boating safety. But we also have those pictures for emergency response. So we might go into an area before a storm passes to get the before pictures, and then after a hurricane makes landfall, we'll go back to get the after pictures, see what has changed along the coastline. And it also has that dual purpose of being able to get that imagery to FEMA so they know where they need to focus their resources. We're actually getting a second King Air this coming August, so we're excited for that one. It is going to replace our current Turbo Commander. The main mission on the Turbo Commander is a snow survey mission. And even though we fly into hurricanes, I think the snow survey mission might actually be the most dangerous mission that we fly because they fly at 500 feet over mountainous terrain, measuring the water equivalent in snowpack. That is super important for flooding forecasts. So they do that year-round, getting soil moisture when there is no snow, and then seeing the difference when there is snow. Another mission on that plane is what we call Grav-D. They fly a very sensitive instrument that's also been flown on the King Air and G4, and it's measuring the very minute changes in the acceleration of gravity, which is helping us to build a better geoid. And that goes into floodplain mapping. It's updating the vertical data. You see, if you ever look at a tide page, you'll see it has, it's called vertical datum 88. That means it was last updated in 1988. So we're working to update that now and get much more information. After the jet prop, we go on to what we call our workforce platforms. We have 4 twin otters. They're called workforces because they do everything. They go out and they do snow survey, they do coastal mapping, but then they also go out and look at different marine life to, again, count species. So they're tracking right whales, they're tracking harbor seals and Alaska seals. They're also doing air chemistry missions where they're literally sniffing the air to see what different kind of gases are in there.
Wow. So
that was a lot of information.
That was a lot of information, a lot that I didn't know. So, you know, the NOAA Corps pilots, the officers are flying the plane, but you also have scientists on the aircraft as well, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So
scientists are all still NOAA employees, but they are not in the uniform services, so they don't have rank like the NOAA Corps officers do. But they support NOAA's missions in a variety of ways, mostly operating all the scientific equipment that we have in the back of the aircraft.
Yeah, and I feel like NOAA is interesting in the fact that when you apply for NOAA, the NOAA Corps, they're looking for science degrees STEM degrees. Not necessarily like if you wanted to be a pilot, they're not saying that you have to have an aeronautics degree, but something in the STEM range. Is that right?
That's correct. And there are many reasons for that. One being that we are not NOAA Corps pilots. We're NOAA Corps officers.
Right.
As an officer, we're expected to be able to fulfill a variety of roles, both operational and the shore assignments. So when we're operational, our job is really to operate that vessel or aircraft. So you don't necessarily need that deep background in science to do that, but you do need that background to be able to communicate with our scientists, understand their mission, and know what they need. That helps us to be better mission facilitators. Now on our shore assignments, that's when we're working in a NOAA office. So that's really where more of the science comes into play. So we're actually doing more of the science in those roles.
Like I've met a lot of NOAA Corps officers who, they're officers, but some of them are scientists. Like they have degrees in biology and physics. And so I think that's really neat that it's such a diverse group of officers. Just sounds like a perfect job to combine a love of service and science. I think that's great.
And that's one of the biggest benefits, I think, to being a NOAA Corps officer. My background is in meteorology. That's what I have a degree in. And I could have worked in so many different fields for meteorology. You know, I could have gone to the National Weather Service, which is part of NOAA. I could have gone into broadcasting. I could have gone into research. But I then would have been kind of pigeonholed in meteorology. Whereas a NOAA Corps officer, you know, I worked on a ship. I've dabbled in oceanography. I've dabbled in cartography and hydrography with the mapping, and now I'm a pilot. Like, who would have thought? I certainly didn't. But it's great that I had all these opportunities open to me, even though I just had the one degree.
Yeah. So I kind of want to back it up a little bit. When did the inspiration to become a NOAA Corps officer happen for you?
I kind of joke around when I tell people the story because my career was an accident, really. I was in college and I was getting a degree in meteorology, but I was interested in oceanography. So I was considering going to get my master's degree in oceanography. But I sat back and thought, well, before I invest another 2 years of my life into school, I should get on a ship and make sure I don't get seasick. I'd hate to find that out later. So I honestly Googled oceanography volunteer, and I found this NOAA opportunity on one of the NOAA ships. To that point, I had known NOAA through the National Weather Service because I was studying weather so intensely. But I never really thought about the oceanographic side of it. I contacted the scientists. I came out to Woods Hole, Massachusetts, got on one of the NOAA ships, and went out for a 2-week fisheries mission, honestly counting scallops. Of course, it was the East Coast, so they called them scallops, but I'm from California, so scallops. And it was something I'd never done before, and we're literally putting a dredge in the water, pulling up scallops, counting, measuring them, and then tossing them back. And it was all just to see how the population changed. But I loved every minute of it. The crew, the officers, everyone was fantastic. And I thought, this is great. I've got to do this again. So the following year, now between my junior and senior year of college, I contacted the chief scientist again, and I said, I would really like to come back out and get some more experience. And he said, yeah, come on out. We're doing clams this year. So I went out. It was a different ship, still on the Woods Hole. And this time, since I was a return scientist, I got to go up on the bridge of the ship to do a little programming every time the dredge was in the water. So since I was on the bridge of the ship, I was interacting more with the officers on the ship, and they started telling me about the NOAA Corps. And I thought, well, this is great. You know, I'm a little burned out on school right now. While I'd still love to get a master's one day, I could use a break, and this sounds like a great opportunity to get experience, still be involved in the field, and then go back to school later. So it was at that point that I made the decision to join the NOAA Corps. And honestly, my initial plan, I was like, I'm going to go in, I'm going to do the 2 years at sea, I'm going to do the 3 years on land. And at that point, I'm either going to quit the NOAA Corps and start working for the Weather Service again, or go back to school for oceanography. Well, my plan was going just as I expected. I did my time at sea. I went to the National Hurricane Center, And at that time, I was like, I'm not ready to go back to school or sit in an office. I'm having too much fun. I like this too much. Unfortunately, that's when I actually received an email that said that NOAA was looking for more pilots. So I decided, hey, let's give that a shot. It sounds like fun.
Well, I know we're all glad that you made the transition to AOC.
Thank you.
How long have you been at AOC?
I've been at AOC just under 3 years now, but I've worked for them for longer. So with NOAA Corps officers, we move around quite a bit. I started my flight training back in 2009, summer of 2009, and we went to flight safety in Vero Beach. So spent 10 months of flight training, and at that point was assigned to the King Hangar. And it was a little unique in the situation because we have one officer that actually works up in Silver Spring, Maryland, who is assigned usually to the King Hangar because they're working with the program, the coastal mapping program that uses the King Hangar. So we kind of have them up there as a liaison between the Aircraft Operations Center and the scientists. So I got in that role. So while I was assigned to the Aircraft Operations Center, I was physically up in Silver Spring, Maryland.
Didn't know that was, that's cool. So I do have a couple more questions. So one being, a lot of the kiddos that are watching this are from 11 to 17 year old. What would you say to the high schoolers that are watching that might be interested in a career in the NOAA Corps as a NOAA Corps officer? What kind of advice would you give them to start preparing now for that type of field?
Well, I would say, especially for those that are getting ready to graduate high school and go on to college, you should definitely take a look at our website, noaacorps.noaa.gov. I don't know if you can send that out to them or not, Kimberly. But look at that. It has all of our eligibility requirements on it, and it will show what you need in the science field. So when I first joined NOAA, we were required to get a scientific degree. That's no longer a requirement, but there is a set number of scientific credit hours that they need. So the people that are interested can go into any field they want, but they do need to make sure that they get that number of credit hours in a science field to be eligible to join them. So that's first off, just so that they can plan for that. The other thing is to just be open to everything. Like I said, I would have never found out about NOAA Corps if I hadn't been open to going out and volunteering on one of the ships. And there are so many opportunities out there. There are NOAA offices all over the U.S. We're here in Florida, and so a lot of people in Florida can come over and get a tour of our facility and talk to us. But don't forget, there are weather service officers in every state. So you can go and just talk to the people in NOAA and get to know them better. Kimberly, you're also welcome to share my contact information. I'm happy to talk to anybody one-on-one and let them know what resources we have that are near them. But my main advice is just to be open. Like I said, I never planned on being a pilot, and I'm loving every day of what I do. So just don't close any doors on yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And one last question. We talk about leadership skills a lot in our programs. And so as a commander, if someone is coming through interviewing, what type of leadership skills, characteristics, might you be looking for in someone that's interviewing?
So many people think to have leadership experience, it's because they had to have been a supervisor or a manager or be designated as a leader in some way. And that's simply not true. I mean, there are leaders everywhere. So if I was interviewing somebody, I would encourage them to think back on any kind of project that they were involved in, whether they were the designated leader or not, and how they might have influenced their team. For the boys and girls out there, if you're in Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts, that is leadership experience. You are learning the same things, the same kind of abilities that we learn now, just at a different level. So think about those kind of things. If you were on a baseball or soccer, softball team, that's a team sport. You're a leader amongst your teammates. So don't discount anything like that.
Yeah, that's great, because I feel like a lot of kids I talk to, they think that they need to have been president of this club or manager of this kind of thing. So that's good, I think, for them to hear. And then my one last question is, what is your absolute favorite part of your job?
The crew. Honestly, I love the people I work with. We are serious when we need to be, and we are silly when we can be. And I think it just builds so much trust amongst us. And when you're talking especially about a flight crew, you have to have that inherent trust in the person sitting next to you, that if something goes wrong, and we certainly hope it never does, but if something goes wrong, we need to be able to trust that that person knows what they're doing and can fulfill their roles. And we train together, we go up to simulator training together, and we practice all of these different emergencies. And you get to the point where you don't even have to necessarily say something. I can make a hand motion, and the people I fly with on a day-to-day basis know what I need. And it's just such a great thing that we can rely on each other that way. And we can be up in the plane, head towards a hurricane, and I swear you never hear so much laughter. I mean, don't get me wrong, we are serious when we need to be, but we also enjoy each other's company, and that is by far the best part.
Yeah, absolutely. And anytime I see y'all together, the camaraderie is it's just great. Y'all are such a tight-knit, I don't know if I'd call it a family, but just a tight-knit group, tight-knit team. And I think that is so great for NOAA, especially over at AOC, because y'all are, flying into dangerous missions together, and you do have to have that 100% trust in the other person. So I think that's great. Well, I really appreciate you hopping on with me. I think that our virtual campers are going to get a lot out of this, and I'll be sure to include NOAA website link and your contact information in case anybody does want to reach out. Can you think of anything else you might want to add before we hop off?
I just say, everyone is aware that we're in a different time now. We're doing this virtually, where I think everyone would much prefer to be in person and doing it. And I just encourage people, don't get discouraged. It will end, and we'll get back to being able to actually see each other. And in the meantime, just take advantage of the time you have at home, take advantage of being with your family, maybe do a little study, and then look at the NOAA website, look into us a little bit more. Maybe it'll get you inspired.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, and I hope I get to see you in person soon.
Yes, I hope so too.